Hello and welcome to Thought of the Day, a brand new show on Y Media. I'm Ramona Singh, and I'm so pleased to talk to you today about why we keep repeating life lessons. If you've ever wondered why the same things keep reoccurring in your life, as in what you'd call a pattern, well, this is the time that we're going to spend some time today to talk about what that is. Why is it happening? It happens to all of us. And it's given me some reflection as of late when I look at the patterns in my life when things keep reoccurring. And I'm not even talking about the good stuff that keep reoccurring. I'm even talking about the things that are not so pleasant that come up. And then you start thinking about yourself, thinking, hey, is this what I deserve? Is this, you start wondering if it's part of your identity, because then the statements such as this always happens to me, or things like, why do I have to always go through this? And then you start thinking, and we're talking about situations that may occur, those reoccurring situations these are all different situations with different people. I'm not even talking about a reoccurring pattern in your life with the same people. I'm talking about the recurring pattern with different people, with different times in your life, whether it's a span of 5 years, 20 years, whatever the case is. Then at some point you start thinking, why is this happening? And it's very easy to get upset, and it's very easy to have a victim mentality and feel bad for yourself. Or also it's a lot easier to subconsciously program yourself to think that this is just how things are and this is what you deserve and all of that, or maybe it changes your identity or what you think about other people. But today, I want to talk about why these patterns repeat, and we call them life lessons, because if they're repeating, then it's the universe's way of giving you an opportunity to figure out, hey, maybe there's a lesson in this. And the best part about all of this is when the lesson is figured out, when you know exactly why this pattern keeps coming into your life and you learn the lesson, then you actually can be released from it and move on. Yes, it does happen that way. Think about it like when you were in grade school. When you started going to school and you had to pass each grade, you had to pass, when you were in elementary school and you started out, you had to pass your reading comprehension, learning how to read, learning how to write, and all of the things that you need to know to be able to pass that grade to move on to the next grade. Because what it was like was your education was being built on top of each other in terms of what you're learning. The foundation was creating it for the next level of what you need to learn, kind of stacking on top of each other like you would going through school, and the years that go through when you go through all those different lessons. Well, same thing happens in life. The only time you don't have to, sit in the same grade again, and in this case, through the same pattern, through the same, whatever you want to call the pattern, whether it's a problem, a reoccurring scenario, whatever the term is to you, it's still a pattern, and therefore you're able to move on. Now, you may be thinking, what do I mean by, what this means? Because at times it's very easy to just brush it off and call it a coincidence, because something happens once, twice, maybe 3 times, maybe there's a big gap between it happening, so you don't really remember the first time it happened, or the second time, or if you do remember, you say, oh, it's just a coincidence, it's just the way things are, it's just my luck. Chuck it off to luck, chalk it off to, that's how people are, or that's how situation is, or maybe I'm like this. Whatever it is that you're saying in that internal conversation in your head, I'm here to say it's not a coincidence. And yes, it's not a coincidence. And the best part about that is that you can change it, because you're wondering, saying, hey, if you're not saying it's a coincidence, that it's not something that's happening to me and that I have control over making it go away and not repeating it, then what am I doing right now to attract those circumstances, those situations in my life? And that's probably what you're wondering. And it almost sounds like I'm saying it's your fault. I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm saying there's some steps to go through to be able to identify what these patterns are, be conscious of it, and then how to be able to learn the lesson, to be able to be released from it and move on. And that was what's going to contribute to what means to be happy in life, to enjoy the very short period of time you have on this earth as a human being, going through a human experience. And it's also limited. So it's about, making sure that your precious time here on earth is a time that is joyful, that brings you so much happiness, love, peace, harmony, all those wonderful feelings we want to feel, and not the negative ones that we go through. So when I say patterns, well, I'm not talking about patterns like being late to an appointment or not meeting deadlines. Those are other patterns that must be addressed, of course, or being absent-minded, or, sleeping in late and not being able to get up on time, or whether you're emotionally eating. Those are all as a result of the patterns that are coming for you to be able to, as a coping mechanism. So we're not going to talk about those specific incidences where you'd have to, of course, work on those patterns to be able to live a more productive life. We're talking about when problems reoccur in your life, and perhaps when a problem reoccurs in your life, maybe part of how you deal with it is through emotional eating. Is that something you're doing? Something to take a look at. Maybe the way you react to these emotional problems that come into your life, well, it's a problem that comes, your emotions and how you deal with it. Is it something that you get depressed about? Is it something that, like I said, emotional eating is something you get angry about? Does it change your entire aura, your entire mood, your entire energy that you exude in society and how you show up? Well, those are the things that we want to avoid. And through that, well, let's talk about how to be able to identify these patterns and how to be able to get rid of them once and for good, and to be able to move on. Now, I want to refer to a movie. If you haven't seen this movie, it's called Groundhog Day. It's a film from 1993. It stars Bill Murray, Andy McDowell, and in this, Bill Murray is a cynical television weatherman. He's covering the annual Groundhog Day event. And Groundhog Day is on February 2nd every year. It's when the groundhog comes out, and based on the shadow of the groundhog, you get to predict how long the winter will last for, whether it's 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever the case is. But it's based on the groundhog, and it's a thing that takes place every year. And in this movie, even though the budget for the movie was about $14 to $30 million, in the box office it did over $100 million. And it's something that I would say, if you haven't seen it, it's a 1993 movie called Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. Watch it. But I want to take you to a clip of this movie, and I want to really capture the feeling one has when you feel like you're reliving the same situation, the same problem that keeps reoccurring in your life. Take a look.
Stuck
It's Groundhog Day!
in Groundhog Day.
I'm reliving the same day over and over.
There you go. That was Bill Murray, and he is, he goes through the first day and he doesn't want to be there covering the event, and then he goes through his series of day, and then he wakes up the next morning at 6 a.m. and all of a sudden he sees the same people, runs into the same situation, and he starts realizing very quickly that he's reliving the same day, even though the people he's interacting with have no idea what he's talking about when he says, hey, you said this to me yesterday. We already talked about this. We already went through this. He realizes this has become his life. And I don't want to spoil the movie, but there needs then, at some point in the movie, he has to figure out what he needs to learn to be able to get out of the pattern. And I'll just leave it at that, but it's a great movie to watch. And sometimes you may feel like that. Maybe not as frequently as Bill Murray, which is on a daily basis, but it could happen through over time. So let's go through what we need to do. Okay, so first thing is, let's list down potentially a few times that this pattern has come about. Now, how do you figure out that there's a pattern? Okay, well, it's about making sure that we're going to go through this list of to figure out that there is even a pattern. Okay, so you take a look at the fact that first you have to be aware. You have to be consciously aware of what is this pattern that keeps coming up. Because if you're not aware of it, then if you can't identify a problem, you're not going to figure out the solution. So the first step is absolute awareness. Then after the awareness that comes to you, you could either chalk it up and say, oh, it's just a coincidence. Oh, it just happens. Oh, it's just my luck. You could just do that with the awareness that's come to your attention. Or you can actually acknowledge and say, okay, I admit this is a pattern that's occurring and I want it to stop. I want to be released from this problem, which I'm also calling a pattern. And then follow that, you have to actually make a choice. That choice is to actively release the patterns. Okay, well, how do you do that? You have to actually get to a point where you realize that it's not what's happening to you. The question, because that's the wrong question. The question is, why is this happening to me? Why is it my luck? That's the wrong question. The actual right question is, what's the lesson I need to learn? That's actually the right question, because you only get to the right answers if you ask the right question. And the right question in a pattern of something that keeps reoccurring in your life is what do I need to learn from this? Because here's the thing, your entire life is mirroring you. I know it sounds bizarre, but even that person that seems to upset you in a situation that you think is unfair to you, they're actually mirroring you. Your external life is a reflection of what's going on inside of you. And you may not even be conscious of it because it's based on your values about yourself. It's based on your perception of life. What does life mean? Is life, something that is a war and a battle that needs to be lived? Is life a school where you need to learn your lessons? Is life something that is holy and sacred? All of these different meanings will give you a different experience of life. Haven't you ever gone to, let's just say, a party with your friend or your family, and you walk away from that party, that event, that gathering, and you have a different experience than that person who was at the same place, at the same event, with the same people, and perhaps what you may think somebody said was offensive, they may think it was just a joke, or it was something lighthearted, or they didn't even acknowledge it. If you say, hey, did you notice so-and-so did this? And they say, no, I thought they were actually being normal. Everybody has a different experience of life based on their perception of that life, based on the perception of their self, their value, how they show up. Do you love yourself? How do you show up in life? What do you think about other people? Are you trusting of other people? Are you cynical about other people? What is it? What are those values? Because those are the values that actually determine how you're experiencing things, and that's the biggest part of awareness. And how do you get aware of those things? Well, it comes down to being mindful. What is being mindful? Being mindful is being in a state where you are paying attention to your life. And that's how you start seeing these patterns. You go into a place where mindfulness is a way that's a daily activity where, based on how you're interacting with your family, how you're treating yourself. Do you take care of yourself? Do you eat well? Do you exercise? Do you care for your hygiene? Do you think you're smart? Do you think you're funny? Do you think you're kind? What do you think of yourself? And when you start becoming mindful about all of these factors about yourself, about other people, what you think about when it comes to, like, what does love mean to you? What does friendship mean to you? I know it sounds funny because you're like, hey, Ramona, I go to a dictionary and there's a definition, but we all have a different definition in our own psyche, in our own mind, about literally everything. Why? Because we're all raised differently. We all grew up, and from the age of, from birth to the age of 7, you're subconscious, you have your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. My conscious mind is right now here with you talking to you, but my subconscious mind is really my programming. So sometimes when you're driving and you don't realize, and you're thinking about things, you don't realize how you got from, work to your home, it's because your subconscious mind has taken over and is taking you through, because consciously your thoughts are somewhere else. Well, the reality is, from the time you're born to the time you're 7 years old, you are in a state of hypnotic, a state where you're actually taking in about life's meanings. So what does it mean about family, love, relationships? Well, you're going to learn that from what you see at home, how your parents interact, how your siblings interact, based on the country that you're growing up in, based on your gender, whatever the case is. All of that gives you your identity. So if you can imagine, as an adult, if you're a 50-year-old adult and you realize, hey, wait a minute, I am operating as a 50-year-old adult, or a 60-year-old adult, or a 40-year-old adult with a programming that was set until I was the age of 7. Are you serious? Yes, I am very serious. But the only way you would know what that programming is by being mindful, by being actually be able to answer these questions for yourself. And so when you're carrying on in life in a mindful state where you're getting to actually pay attention to every detail of your life, and actually find the deeper meaning about why things are happening. I know it sounds like I'm saying go overthink. I'm not saying overthink. I'm saying pay a little more attention than just thinking, oh, this is life, there's no end, there's no purpose, or that there's no consequence, or there's no correlation of things, and that there's no connection between what I say, what my intention is, and what happens to me. So this is all part of being mindful. And that's when you start realizing, when you're mindful, you start realizing these patterns. You start realizing, hey, wait a minute. What's happening where I'm having the same thing reoccur with different names, with different people, with different scenarios? Is it something that happens in your workplace that keeps happening regardless of what project you work on, regardless of what colleague you work with, regardless of which company you work at? Is that reoccurring? Is it reoccurring with your friends? Is it reoccurring in your family and then with the people that are close to you? What is that thing that keeps reoccurring? That's the pattern I'm talking about. And so as opposed to getting to a point where you want to say, well, why me? Or, blame everybody else. Everybody else is wrong. Everybody else is doing it. This is how people are. And that language that keeps playing, which is completely negative to your being, that's when you start asking, well, what do I need to learn? Because as soon as you ask what I do need to learn, and you actually start paying attention to what it is, and even as far as writing it down, I go through the exercise. I actually take pen to paper and I start jotting it down. I start jotting it down of all the patterns, and then I'll list what took place. And then I'll find the similarities to figure out what is it that's going on. That's what actually makes me feel better, instead of feeling like a victim or feeling like things are happening to me, as opposed to it's happening for me. Why is it happening for me and not to me? Because it's giving me an opportunity to learn something. It's giving me the opportunity to mature and graduate from that lesson so I can be let go. Because here's the thing, if you resist the lesson, if you resist what you need to know, then it will persist. There's a saying, and you'll always remember this, what you resist will persist. What does that mean? If I resist doing something, it will keep coming back up. It'll keep coming back up. The moment I say, I'm tired of this repeating itself, I want it to go away. It's not going to go away because you wish it to go away. It's not going to go away because you pray it to go away. It's not going to go away because you get mad at it to go away. It actually goes away the second you resist it, you submit to it by actually delving into and saying, okay, what do I need to know? What do I need to pay attention to? What is it about this scenario that keeps repeating itself? Then you're no longer resisting. When you say it's a coincidence, I have bad luck, or whatever you chalk it up to, that's resistance, because you're not meeting the opportunity to face that challenge. And at times it is something that you don't want to face. It is things that you rather just turn a blind eye to, because it's a lot more comfortable to be able to not do this hard work that maybe you perceive as hard work that I'm describing. But guess what? That becomes uncomfortable really quick the more it occurs in your life. So let's set the intention for what this looks at. Okay, so every morning when you get up, when you get out of bed, have an intention in place. If you can't figure out what the lesson is that you need to learn by asking what is the lesson, then say, I need an answer to. Ask this from the universe. Ask this to the God that you pray to. If you don't believe in God, there's the higher being, there's a higher creator. There's some purpose why you're here. So definitely ask, what is the answer I need to get to? And how do I make this decision? Whatever the question is, you want to know what it is. If you stay silent enough within, and if you pray for it enough, two things you're doing. Okay, if you don't believe, when it comes to religion, spirituality, say, ask and you shall receive. Let's say you don't believe in that, and that's good. But what you're doing by asking these questions as your mantra when you get up is you're training your brain to be able to pick up the answers when they come to you, because now you're saying, hey, wait a minute, brain, stay focused. I'm giving you a task, because there's so many things you don't acknowledge throughout the day. Can you honestly say to me that everything you see is everything that's in the room? How many times have you looked for your car keys or your house keys, and you looked in the same place over and over again? You can't see it until somebody points it out to you, and you're like, wait a minute, I already checked that drawer. I already looked at that table. I know it wasn't there. How is it there all of a sudden? it's because you're not seeing everything you need to see at all times until you actually train your brain to do that. And that's why I'm talking about why it's so important to understand the difference between your conscious, your subconscious mind, understand that your brain is like the hardware and your programming is the software. And you can upgrade that. It's not something that you just upgrade for your computer or your telephone. You can actually upgrade yourself in terms of what your perception is and how you see things. So what you do is when you go through these, asking yourself these questions, what will happen now is now your brain will pick up what you're hearing on the radio. Maybe the song has a lyric in it that says something to you and you're like, wait a minute, I can relate to that. Why do you like certain songs aside from the beat? The beat could be cool, but sometimes you like a song because of its lyrics, because it resonates with you. It's identifying some point in your life, whether it's some joy or some pain, whatever you experience, you emotionally connect to a song or a movie because it resonates with you. Well, when you start asking yourself, what is it I need to learn? These things start popping up. Maybe you hear a conversation. Maybe it's something you see on TV and you're like, wait a minute, is that it? Those are all subconscious ways of the lesson actually coming to you. The next thing is when you start becoming mindful of your day to day, you stop sleepwalking through your life. What do I mean by sleepwalking? I mean, you no longer just get up, get ready, have your morning breakfast or lack thereof, and just go on with your day and just, without any realization of, the cause and effect, the correlation of things, what you're doing, what your energy is being put out there, what it's being attracted to, what it's bringing into your life, the fact that literally everything in your life is a mirror of what's going on inside. So if your life is chaotic, you gotta go inwards and work on some of those things for things to calm down. Haven't you ever heard the saying that it's not about you changing the world, it starts with changing yourself, because that's the world, and the world around you will change. And so that is what it's meant by, not sleepwalking through all of this and being more mindful of it. And then, of course, when you start accepting responsibility for your life, because when I say everything is a mirror to you, that what that person did is actual reflection of you, and it is. If you actually really sit down and you think about it and you start looking at the facts, you'll realize, wait a minute, this is a reflection to me, a mirror to me, because I need to learn something about myself. That is taking full responsibility for your life. It's no longer that person doing something to you. It's no longer that situation that's coming up. It's no longer life is unfair. It's not everybody else's or everything else's problem. It becomes your problem. It becomes your responsibility in terms of what's happening to you, because yes, you do have control of it in terms of how you show up and what your perceptions are. There's some devastating things that happen that there's like no answer to it. When you have, the innocent child suffering through some of the worst things, whether it's disease or any of those things, those are the challenges that you rise above when you realize, what do I need to learn in this? What do I absolutely need to learn in this situation? So again, it's not about asking, why is this happening to me? It's about asking, what can I learn from this? And as soon as you start doing that, then you see these patterns and you start reframing them by understanding what's actually happening. And that's how you actually get released from it. Because as soon as you learn the lesson, it will no longer happen. And let's say you come to a point where you think you learned the lesson. You're like, great, fantastic. I'm never going to go through this pattern again. It's not going to reoccur. This problem I will not face, because I heard if I acknowledge the pattern, I learned the lesson, it goes away. And let's say at some point it happens again. All that's telling you is saying, here's another opportunity. You didn't learn the full lesson, or you didn't learn the lesson in its entirety, or what it needs to actually be. And that's when you realize, okay, let me get hard back to work and be able to figure this out so I can make sure it goes away, I graduate, I'm released from it, and I move on. Because if you don't do that, I promise you, it will show up again with a new name, with a new situation, and then you're gonna feel that you're back stuck with what Bill Murray was stuck in that Groundhog Day, where he's waking up every day and he's like, why am I reliving this day? Until he figures it out. And watch the movie, it's a great movie. He figures it out and he breaks the pattern. So awareness, very key point. Become aware, conscious of the pattern, the problem that keeps, so it's becoming conscious of the problem to understand it is a pattern. Then it's about acknowledgement, admitting that you actually have it and you want to release it. So if you start listing all those times that this happened in the pattern, list what happened in those scenarios, what were the circumstances, what did you learn from, what happened to you, how did you contribute to it, what did you learn? Then if you go back in all those scenarios, you can actually circle all the similar ones, and you'll be very shocked to know you're going to have a pattern that's going to show up, a different type of pattern, because some of these characteristics are the same in completely different scenarios with different people involved. And then that's when you realize, wait a minute, am I attracting this to myself? What's happening? Okay, then you have a choice. The choice is you want to actively release these patterns through mindfulness, because once when you learn the lesson, it's no good. You learn the lesson, then the next day you forget the lesson, they'll come back to you. It's got to be a lesson learned where you move on. Like just like how when I went from crawling as a child, I was crawling and then I learned how to walk. I didn't forget how to walk all of a sudden go back to crawling. I learned how to walk, and then I went from walking to running. I didn't go backwards. Same thing goes with lessons. It's not about a momentary thing where you learn it and then you're like, yeah, that's too hard. I don't want to do it. Okay, I'm going to forget about it. It's going to reoccur, unfortunately. And so these are key things of how to be able to navigate through this life and come out on the other side a happier person. And I mean, that's really the purpose of what I wanted to talk about today. And that comes with having that strategy in place in terms of having a realistic plan to make sure that you're not falling back in the same patterns in terms of whether it's the way you think about something, it's whether the type of scenario you deal with, or putting yourself in those circumstances, whatever the case is. You want to be able to have a strategy where you're not going back to that, because you're not going to forget the lesson. And then it comes with commitment by taking action, the commitment not to forget through action or lack thereof, depending on what the scenario is. And of course, after some due time, well, you want to celebrate, right? You want to celebrate that you got over this pattern, you got over this problem. Hey, you solved it. You didn't need anybody else to solve it for you because you did it yourself. You put in the time, you put in the effort, you did it yourself. And of course, consistency is always key, even after the celebration, because you don't want to celebrate and then forget. So discipline is a big part of that, to be able to stay mindful. And what does this all do? Well, this will help you not to take things personally, not to go into a victim mentality, and it also makes you not make assumptions about what's happening, other people or yourself. And that's how you can live a better, more creative, loving, peaceful, joyful life, which I think we're all striving for. That's all the time we have for Thought of the Day. I'm Ramona Singh. Until next time, take care and be well.